Everybody, not just New Yorkers, people around the United States and around the world have been curious about what design would be selected for the site of Ground Zero where the World Trade Center towers stood. Daniel Liebskind, the architect who lives in Berlin, has been selected. Now the focus is on the builder, the man who holds the lease. He joins me now for a conversation about his intentions. Larry Silverstein, welcome.
Thank you.
Just a bit of history. Why did you want to have the World Trade Center? What was it about the Trade Center for you as a real estate man that was important?
I think I might need deep psychoanalysis to fully understand and respond to that question. But Charlie, I signed a lease with the Port Authority back in 1980 for a parcel of land that it owned with a Carnide substation on it. And the signing of that lease gave me the right to build a major building on that site. And as a result of working with the Port Authority, we significantly increased the size of the building from 1 million feet to 2 million feet. And I proceeded to build it. And when I completed it in 1987, I remember at the dedication of that building, which is a large building, 2 million feet, significant size. I remember looking up at the Twin Towers, and here is this major edifice that I just completed. The Twin Towers dwarfed it by huge magnitudes. And I thought to myself, my goodness, wouldn't it be wonderful to someday own that real estate? And so when, years later, when it was decided that the port would exit the daily operation of
Port
real
Authority.
estate, Port Authority, I was approached by the Port Authority and asked if I would have an interest in competing for the opportunity. And my immediate response, without hesitation, was of course. And therein started the odyssey, which I think commenced in either, I think it was 99 or 2000, finally culminated in the bidding process. And I remember it coming to a head. I think the last and final bid was due on the 30th of January of 2001. And this is months and months of work and millions of dollars worth of expenditure of time and effort, analysis, and so forth. And as I was crossing the street, walking up Madison Avenue, at 57th Street, walking to 59th Street, between Madison and Park, where I live, I was hit by a car being driven by a drunk driver who ran the light. I ended up with a broken pelvis, smashed in a number of places, the most excruciating pain of my life, and ended up in the hospital, of course. I remember lying there and saying to myself, how much time do I have, right? This is the 25th of December, or January rather, and the bid is due on the 30th of January. So I remember saying to myself, finally saying to the doctors, you know, can you reduce the morphine? I've got to think, I've got to get more people together here. I've got to think this through and submit the bid, because I can't stop now. It's too much was at stake. And believe it or not, they reduced the dosage of morphine. We framed the bid and ultimately won it. And the prize, therefore, if you will, and signed the documents and took title to the buildings, the leasehold, 99-year leasehold. And we did so, I think it was the 26th day of July of 2001. And of course, 6 odd weeks thereafter.
6
weeks thereafter, disaster struck, and it was certainly a defining moment in the lives of New Yorkers in general, and many, many people around the world.
Where were you on September 11th?
You know, I was home, and the only reason I wasn't where I was every morning subsequent to the 26th day of July My mornings were spent usually at a breakfast meeting at Windows, an 8 o'clock breakfast meeting, Windows, the top of it, right? And then going down to visit with my tenants, my new tenants, at the Trade Center, getting to know them, understanding their problems and so forth, ascertaining how we could service their needs better, which is one of the first things you do when you acquire a property. Begin to meet your tenants and start talking with them. And so my mornings were spent at the Trade Center, and then by noon I was back uptown. And so that particular morning, because I have light-colored hair and fair skin, and I'm an annuity to the dermatologist, my wife, God bless her, had made an appointment for me at the doctor. And I remember dressing to go to the doctor. I'm finally saying to my wife, I said, sweetheart, I've got so much to do downtown. I got to cancel this. I've got to go downtown. And she said, you're not going to cancel this appointment. You're going to the dermatologist. And, having been married now to the same woman for 46 years, you get this sense of determination on occasion, their voices. And I said, okay, yes, dear, I'll go. I'll go. And then just minutes later, received a telephone call to turn on a television set and witnessed this horrendous circumstance. The first plane hitting, and then the second plane hitting. Of course, with the second hit, it became obvious that this was terrorism. But thereafter was absolute hell because so many of our people were down there. We were in occupancy, temporary occupancy of the 88th floor of the North Tower prior to moving permanently into the 91st floor of the North Tower. And so my children, two of my children, Roger and Lisa, both work with me. They were on their way to work at 9 o'clock. Many others, about 100 people with us on their way to work. As it turns out, had the plane struck 15 minutes later, our firm would have been decimated. As it is, we lost 4 of our people, 2 of whom I had hired just a few weeks prior to that. And there are 6 children among them. And it was a horrendous, horrendous experience.
There is now a lawsuit. And it is said the legal question is whether this was 1 incident or 2. Where does that stand? Because the answer to that question means billions of dollars.
It does. And it is the magnitude of the dollars here is huge. One event is $3.55 billion. And 2 events comes to, in this case, $6.7 billion. And so we are waging a battle against the insurers who would like to avoid paying as much as they can possibly avoid. Because the money, it's the only source of money available for a building, the Trade Center. There's no other source. Monies from the federal government are all being used for other purposes, infrastructure and a whole range of other needs, humanitarian needs. And so because we're obligated under the ground lease to pay a rental of $120 million a year, and because we're obligated under that ground lease to rebuild, put back the 10 million feet of space, the million square feet of, and the retail space below it and so forth. We simply recognized early on the need to demand that the insurers fulfill their responsibility under the policies. And so we early on asserted multiple events because in this instance we had 2 different planes hitting 2 separate towers at 2 separate time frames, bringing each tower down independently of the other at 2 different time frames. Separate fire in the North Tower, separate fire in the South Tower, bringing down those towers. And so we are now finding ourselves in this furious legal confrontation with the insurers who are resisting with every possible
How long will
maneuver.
that drag out?
Well, interestingly, the issue of multiple events or one event is going to be heard in the Federal Appeals Court here in the Second Circuit. I think the oral argument is taking place the week of the 14th of April, this coming April. And shortly after the argument, the court will render a decision.
One event or two.
One event or two. The Attorney General filed an amicus, Attorney General of the State of New York filed an amicus brief on our behalf saying clearly the law is clear, it's unambiguous, this is multiple events. You know, if you understand the law, if you understand the legal precedents, I think the most pregnant case in this matter, if you will, a similar set of circumstances in which a crazed American set fire to 4 courthouses in California, and the fires, he said, were almost simultaneously set, and in that instance, the policy was covered by travelers, right. And the travelers' policy forum, as the case with us. They cover the tower. We also have travelers covering our towers with the same policy forum. And in California, travelers argued the law is clear and unambiguous. They said it has nothing to do with one crazed mind, one plan, and one person. They said the law is clearly what is the proximate cause of the loss. And they said in California, 4 separate fires brought down 4 separate buildings, and therefore it's multiple events. And the federal court in California so held, and on behalf of travelers, they agreed it was multiple events. Now here in New York, they're coming in and arguing just the opposite. Now, you might say, why? Well, in California, they were on the primary coverage, on the lower coverage. Therefore, multiple, they wouldn't pay the amounts that otherwise they would have to pay. They did very well in California. In New York, it's just the reverse. In New York, they're on the multiple layers, not on the lower.
You believe you'll win this thing?
Well, the law is the same in California, New York. It's the law of the land, and the answer is most assuredly yes. We're going to win multiple events. We will collect the $6.7 billion as a result that's needed to rebuild the Trade Center.
Here's what I don't understand. We just went through this process, ending up in today's papers with the selection by the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation of Daniel Liebskind, his plan for those 16 acres, correct? Mm-hmm. What does it mean? Do you now take Mr. Liebeskind's plans and build that building, that combination of buildings, or do you do something else?
We have started sitting with Dan and his wife Nina, and by the way, these are very, very talented people.
You mean you started as of today, or you've had consultation with him over a period of...
We've spent some time with Dan. We've gotten to know him, and I've been working with him. And when I say we, it's with our architectural advisors at Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, David Childs and his group. The purpose there is to take Dan's plan, which incidentally is significantly improved from what he first proposed. This plan works brilliantly.
Because he now has... Why is it significantly improved?
The treatment of the memorial area is much better.
It was 70 feet, now it's 30 feet.
It was 30 feet.
And you put transit underneath it.
That is correct. But additionally, the only portion of the wall that will be exposed, the only portion of the slurry wall, is the western portion along West Street. It's handled in a much more sensitive fashion. It is also handled in a protective fashion. that slurry wall will be in a temperature controlled glass enclosed structure, so that you'll actually be able to see it as you look at it. And in certain instances, you'll be able to go down into the lower reaches of that wall if you wish to do so. But the wall's now protected. It is limited in terms of the scope of what becomes visible within the pit, if you will, or in the immediate environs, because the balance of the wall on the south side of the parcel and will be a material that most likely be stone of some kind, granite or whatever. On the north side, there will be stone treatment, but there will also be buildings on the north side and buildings on the east side, so that at this juncture, the wall itself is limited to that portion which parallels West Street, but only to a limit of 30 feet. And there's a ramp down from grade down to the lower reaches of that pit. Treatment now is much better than it was in the original versions.
Okay, the most recent Liebskind plan.
Yes.
You like it?
Yes, I think this plan will work.
You can work with it?
Yes, I believe we certainly
can. He will be your
architect.
architect.
Well, he is the architect who was responsible for this site plan.
Right.
This is his plan, his concept. And now it's our job to tweak the plans to the point where we're sure that the buildings will be able to work, that the floor sizes will function, that the cores, the elevator cores, will work within the buildings themselves, that the dimensions between the cores and the walls will be appropriate, will be proper. And there's a great deal of work that needs to be done with respect to the design of the buildings themselves. Okay. But the site, the street grid, for example, how the street grid functions will be as Dan has laid that out. And so you have the reimposition of the streets, Greenwich Street, for example, north-south axis, Fulton Street, east-west axis. That is Dan's plan.
And you like the way
we can work with
the transit plan you can work with?
And, well, that's part of the process going forward. The port and we have spent a huge amount of time working below grade. What we now have to do is to be sure that the mass transit below grade ties in to the site plan at grade that Dan has developed. And I think at this juncture it probably can and will.
Did you prefer Liebskind to the Think project?
Yes, I did.
Why?
The Liebskind plan, in my judgment, better handles the memorial area itself. I feel that it works better. There is more of a capability of providing the site for the use of the contestants who will now go forward in an effort to determine what the memorial itself will be, what the message will be.
So his plan, in your judgment, offered a better opportunity to do a memorial.
Yes.
Within the... Will it be at the site of the Twin Towers? It actually will be on the footprint. Everybody agrees on that.
Oh, yes. It'll be on the footprint.
The memorial will be on the footprint.
On the footprint, but an enlarged footprint, if you will. That memorial now, I think, contains something like 7 acres.
Yeah.
Which is significant.
That's the size of the footprint.
No. The footprints were an acre each. Each footprint was
and then so we've enhanced that to be 7 acres.
That's correct.
What happens to this notion of 10 million square feet of commercial space, which was the commercial space of the World Trade Center?
Dan's plan provides for 10 million square feet of space on the site. And that's what we're going to go forward in an effort to make sure those buildings function properly, effectively, efficiently, that we have space that is marketable, is rentable. And so that's a function of a very significant amount of effort that's now going to be required to go forward to define this plan to a point where we know that as a site plan, it's going to work, and then as individual buildings on that site plan. The individual buildings will work. And there's tweaking that's going to be required going forward, and that'll be accomplished.
What does tweaking mean?
Well, it means working, the architects working together to assure that at the end of the effort that we have buildings that are functional, that are rentable, that are marketable, buildings that work on those sites as set forth in Dan's plan, and that enable us to replace the 10 million square feet that was there prior to 9/11.
Now, the role of David Childs and Skidmore will be as consultant to you? Because
Yes,
they had
sir.
a plan, but those plans are no...
Actually, there was a group of young people who came together and to put in young people who had not yet arrived at the level of the other architects.
Now, you've already started construction on the world on number 7.
Number 7 is moving forward as we speak. That's under construction.
When do you imagine that you will break ground on the rebuilding on the site of plans conceived by Daniel Liebskind? 10 years?
Well, interestingly, we now have a site plan. That was decided on.
That's what they voted on.
Yes.
And announced today.
Yesterday. Announced today.
Right.
Yes. We've got the site plan. That's done. The work below grade with respect to mass transit now has to be advanced further, and definitive decisions made with respect to the mass transit, and that needs to be done now, quickly, because it will take the balance of '03 to simply do the engineering and design work that's required below grade to enable construction to start, physical construction to start on the below grade area. It contained 2.7 million square feet prior to 9/11. And that's area that is going to be utilized for, not just for retail, it's going to be utilized for mass transit, back of the house facilities, central refrigeration plants. It'll be used for the concourse connection between Fulton Nassau Street, that station, and the path tubes and the new arrivals terminal. It will tie into everything underground and all the way, ultimately make its way to World Financial Center at Battery Park City. So there's great complexity below grade, and all of that needs to be designed so that physical construction can start in the beginning of '04. It'll take all of '04 and at least all of '05
to build the
complete
transit.
To build that below grade area.
Right.
To bring that back
That's
up.
all of '05 right there.
All of '04 and '05, at least that, to bring that back up to grade. So that it won't be until the beginning of '06 until you will see the steel of the first and probably the iconic tower rising above grade in the beginning of '06.
This is the tower that's going to be the tallest structure in the world, with a garden at the top.
Yes. And so
that'll be '06 probably.
That will probably
begin
be 06.
to build that.
Yeah, begin to build that. And that will take all of '06 and all of '07 and probably all of '08 to complete.
In the meantime, on a parallel track, they're going to be deciding what to do about the memorial, per se.
That is correct.
And, but they've got a site plan there, so they know where the memorial is going to go.
They know exactly where the
And
memorial
they know how it has to fit within the context.
That is correct.
The Port Authority owns the land.
Yes.
Do you think they'll ever make some switch with the city of New York and they'll give up some rights to airports or gain some rights to airports?
You know, it's possible. And frankly, I'm agnostic on this issue. We have a contract
You have a hard lease.
Yes, and it sets forth our obligations under the lease and our rights under the lease, and whether we work with the Port Authority of the city, to us is not terribly material. We have had a relationship with the Port Authority that's gone on since 1980, so we have a 23-year history with them, and therefore working with them is very easy. But if in the last analysis a deal is consummated between the Port Authority and the city, we'll work just as closely with the city as we have with the Port Authority. And so we're prepared to do it on either event.
Someone today, knowing that you were coming in, said to me, I wonder if he has any idea as to whether the city and the state will try to ease him out of the picture for some reason, because this is so, you've heard this before.
Sure I have.
Do you fear it? Is it possible?
You know, I always say to myself, since I've spent this enormity of time and have this major commitment to this rebuilding, having suffered what I've suffered, having experienced what I've experienced, as we all have, I find myself wondering what purpose would be served by my being taken out? What does it accomplish? I expect to collect the $6.7 billion from the insurers. It's one hell of a major battle. I'm doing it, and no one's there doing it with me. Yeah. I expect to collect it, and I've stated publicly and otherwise, as is my obligation, these monies are going to be used for one purpose, and that's rebuilding the trade center.
You have to sign something, an intent to rebuild, but it does not define how long it will take you to rebuild.
No, it does not define how long. It just says I have to do it as expeditiously as possible. And clearly that's in the interests of New York, is to get it done as quickly as we can.
But we have watched the Lower Manhattan Development Corporation go through all this. In the beginning, we had a lot of plans that nobody liked. Nobody, as far as I can tell, right?
There were many people who were upset with that first group of plans.
Yeah. That was the majority opinion, fair to say. Then we had the second group of plans, and everybody said much better, and people liked different ones, and finally they have chosen Liebskind. And the man who holds the lease says, I like Liebskind. I can work with Liebskind.
I can.
Is it right to say you're the guy who can determine what they build there? In the end, the only money to build there is money that you're going to have because of the insurance money.
That's correct.
And that it is your option to determine the kind of building that's done there. We're not talking about the transit, we're talking about the building.
Charlie, you're absolutely correct. These are my absolute rights. And I think we're governed, in the last analysis, by what's good for New York. We're here. We have a certain amount of time available to us. This is a city.
On the life to live.
A life to live. Right. This is an incredibly wonderful city. Whatever I have in life, I've made here. The product of a public school education in the public school system in New York, and I've been blessed with very good fortune. I simply have decided that the next 10 years of my life will be spent with one thought, and that is, I'm going to rebuild the Trade Center as best as I possibly can. I think working with Dan and his wife Nina will be a very exciting experience. He's a very, very competent architect.
To know Dan and Nina, you have to always say, and his wife Nina.
Oh, I do.
There is a partnership, if I've ever seen a partnership.
It's a great partnership, right? Very strong.
Okay, so you like the way things have worked out.
I'm very excited. And
this is your architect now.
Well, interestingly enough, he's our architect, all of our architects.
Right.
He's the choice of LMDC and the port and the governor and the mayor.
Right.
And I think that therefore we've got something now that in fact is workable, and with such professional people, if we have good professionals on our side, and we do, there's not a doubt in my mind that we'll be able to accomplish a mission here that I think we'll all be able to look back on many years from now with great excitement and accomplishment.
So you are saying to me that you like the way everything's developed so far, and you feel a real sense of public responsibility.
I feel an enormous sense of public responsibility. Yes, I do. And because this is not about me and not about my rights or my obligations. It's about rebuilding the Trade Center. We've got to put that back, and we have the obligation to do the very best we can. It's an obligation that we have to ourselves, to each other, to our children, to our grandchildren. It's the only thing to do at this juncture.
Who will build the memorial?
The
on
memorial
the site?
The memorial, it will probably, my assumption is that ultimately it will be the function of the federal government, perhaps the Parks Department. I'm not sure exactly how that's done.
They'll have to find the money to build the memorial.
Yes, I would assume that to be the case.
There is today in Lower Manhattan a glut. I mean, there's a glut of commercial space. Is there an incentive to rebuild commercial space in the near future?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Because you think things are going to change?
Well, yes, most certainly. We're certainly in a down market today. There's more space available than there is demand currently. But Charlie, if you've been around as long as I have, and in this business as long as I have, you go through cycles. We're going through another cycle. And we watched, so many of us watched what happened in 1990. We had a huge amount of vacant, see-through office buildings, Class A buildings that had been completed. And we were sitting with something like 48 million square feet of magnificent space at the beginning of 1990. Surplus space. We all looked at each other and said, my God, how long is it going to take us to fill that space?
A lot of people went broke.
Right? And a lot of people went under in that period of time. It was a terrible time in terms of the economy. Experience was bad. And if you recall, 1991 was a bad year, and 92 was a bad year, and 93 and 4 and so forth became a little bit better. But strangely, most amazingly, by 97, 98, that space was gone. It was absorbed. We absorbed 48 million square feet of space in about 8 years, 7 years.
All right.
All we're doing now, Charlie, is putting back 10 million feet over a period of 10 years.
10 million square feet.
Over a period of 10 years. That's right.
Okay. When you say, lots of questions being raised in the New York Times today, you know, in a piece by Ed Wyatt, who's been writing well about this, basically said that there are several areas in which people don't know what the answer is. One is the proposed underground parking garages. What's the answer to that?
Well, I think, first of all, we did have car parking at the Trade Center prior to 9/11. At the moment, there is a serious look at not just car parking, but at bus parking as well. And the concern is for the millions of visitors who are expected to come down to the Trade Center and to the memorial particularly. Where will the buses bring them to the area? Exactly. Where will they be housed? And so there are some who have advocated putting it underneath on the site. And that's a possibility. There are others who would argue that that is not an appropriate use for that area. It wasn't there before. Those buses should be placed somewhere else. And there are other places that one can put them if it's so determined and that it's desirable to place them elsewhere. There are families who are very much concerned. I can certainly empathize with their position that buses should not be parked down there or under the memorial, if you will.
Under now that he's raised from 70 to 30.
That's correct. And so that's one of the thoughts.
Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I personally can empathize with their position very readily. Buses were not there before, and I think that perhaps it'd be terrific if we could find an alternate site for buses that will be servicing the memorial. And if it's possible to so do, then I think it's possible to visualize other uses than for bus parking. That would be much less offensive to the families.
The enclosed mall.
Yes.
What about that?
Well, the retail is the responsibility of Westfield. When I first saw the Trade Center and had the opportunity to acquire it, I recognized that there are people who are better equipped to handle the retail component than I. I know office buildings, and retail is a specialty unto itself. And so I went to some wonderful friends and people I know very well, the Lowy family, and they control Westfield. I remember taking Frank and saying, "Come on, Frank, let's go down. Let me show you something." We walked through the center together, and I showed him the retail. I said, "Frank, let's do this together. You do the offices, you do the retail, and I'll do the office space." And he said, "Let's do it." And so Westfield acquired the retail component simultaneously, on a separate lease, simultaneously with our acquiring the office component. And then, of course, we both experienced this tragedy together. They had 450,000 square feet that they acquired in the trade center when they acquired their leasehold position, with a right to expand that 450,000 feet by another 150,000 to a total of 600,000 feet. And their concept was to expand it in on the plaza between the Twin Towers. They believe today that they can expand that significantly farther. They can build and absorb because they believe there's a need for 700,000, 800,000, 900,000 square feet of good quality destination retail, which could be very well, it could very well serve the residents of Lower Manhattan and be destination retail, be exciting, be far more extensive than it was.
One thing that the mayor's made clear is that he believes the plans must contribute to an active street life downtown.
Oh, yes, they must. They must. And therefore, by definition, I think that means retail at grade, retail below grade, and perhaps retail a level above grade.
You buy into the mayor's plans for the Lower Manhattan?
Yes.
You don't have any great reservation, no great conflict with what he wants to do downtown?
No, I think what the mayor advocated was right. His concept, incidentally, is to create a demand for space down there by making it into a tax-free zone for foreign corporations. Wonderful idea. And he said the way we're going to get them is by a direct train to the plane connection from JFK and from Newark directly.
You get them able to come right in.
And so, wonderful idea, and I salute that totally. And so, one of the things, and Governor Pataki feels similarly, that this is an initiative that needs to be done, because if you look back, you'll see that there's been no new mass transit initiatives serving Lower Manhattan for the last 50 years. Right? It's all gone midtown. Nothing's gone downtown. And so, our mayor says at this juncture, and I think rightfully so, it's time for that connection to be made.
A parallel development to make sure that Lower Manhattan.
So I think it's a wonderful idea, and I support it fully.
Let me just review three things that are interesting me. These towers you're saying, that what you want to build is essentially, with a little tweaking, what Daniel Liebskind has designed. That's now Larry Silverstein's plan.
Let me rephrase it for you, Charlie. Dan designed a wonderful site plan for us. And what we need to do is now work with Dan's site plan to develop buildings that are reflective of his concept for that site. And at the same time, be sure that those buildings will work.
They'll be economically viable or something else?
Well, a combination of things. If you can't build space that's rentable, then we have done ourselves.
The model falls apart.
Model falls apart.
It'll never be built.
Well, I wouldn't say it falls apart because clearly it's possible to, if you look at Dan's building designs, he did not have the adequate amount of time in the last couple of weeks. That was all that was allotted to him, to go back.
When he was tweaking his own plan.
That's correct.
All right.
And so we spent time with him during this period, giving him our input as to what floor sizes we needed and how the distance between the core and the walls and so forth, spatial relationships, because Dan is not, I would not qualify Dan as a major expert in high-rise office buildings. He's an incredibly creative architect, talented man.
His most prominent work is the Jewish Museum in Berlin.
And others. I mean, he's done some wonderful public work, and others. I mean, very talented. Skidmore, for example, is a firm that is superb when it comes to high-rise office building designs. And so having them work together to take these buildings and mold them to the point where they are workable, where they are rentable, where it is marketable, and still honor Dan's site plan. so that the streets are where they
Well,
are.
site plan is one thing, but a design for what the, the tower ought to look like is another.
Well, this is...
Now, I mean, I want to make sure I'm not misunderstanding you. Are you saying, well, Skidmore will now take over and take his design, and because they know what office space is about, and you got to have 10,000 square feet of office space, 10 million, on that site, because that's what was there before?
Well, the interesting thing is, if you look at Dan's plan does provide for the 10 million square feet. Now, we just have to make sure that that plan will work, and will work to the point where that space is marketable. And so that's the function of bringing Skidmore together with Dan, so that this can be accomplished.
And that's your decision to make in the end?
It is. It's our decision to make in the end, absolutely. But I want to honor Dan's site plan, because I think it's a good one. It's the one that was chosen by the people of the city of New York, by our government, by our mayor, by our governor, by LMDC, Port Authority. That's the right thing to do. And there's not a doubt in my mind that we can do that. It's accomplishable. And we're going to go forward and get this done, and we're going to do it together. And it's the most exciting challenge of my life.
Thank you for coming.
It's a pleasure.
Good to have you here.
Thank you, Charlie.
We'll be right back, and we'll remember one of the great figures of public television, Fred Rogers.